Hello everyone, Tina here. I hope you're having a fantastic day. Thanks so much for joining me. Well, today I get to share with you the 10 cards I made with the My Monthly Hero kit for December 2018. This is a kit by Hero Arts and it is fantastic. I want to show you briefly what comes in the kit, but before we do that, I want to apologize for last month's kit. I did receive it and it was a beautiful kit, but it was an advent calendar. And I felt a little bit limited, so I didn't do a 10 card one kit. I skipped it. I thought my options were very limited on creating 10 cards without being the same 10 cards. So with that being said, we're going to jump in. If you are a subscriber, Hero Arts gave out a thank you stamp set, and it is super cute. We're not going to use that today. We're just going to use the kit contents. But this is your 6x8 stamp set. Super fun. Dandelions are so fun and so pretty. You have whimsical little fairies in there, and you have mushrooms and little mice. Super duper cute, and I had a blast creating with this. You get 18 coordinating dies that will cut out each one of those images, and then you also get some shimmer cardstock. You get a gold, a green, a real pale pink, and then like a rose pink. You get some confetti sequins and a Sakura Stardust glitter pen. So that's everything in the kit. We're going to jump in with our first card. We have lots to do. So we're going to do some stamping. I'm going to place a piece of Nina 80-pound cardstock in here and my mini Misty, and we're going to grab the dandelion that's whole and the dandelion that's half blown away. We're also going to stamp the little ladybug that's holding the dandelion seed along with two of the leaves. We'll pick them up with the lid of my Misty, and we're going to ink them up with Memento Tuxedo Black ink. We'll go ahead and stamp those. Now I wanted one more of the ladybugs and a couple more of the leaves. So once we have our images stamped, I'm going to take my panel and flip it around, and then we're going to clean off our dandelions. We'll put those back on our stamp. Yeah. And then I'm going to lower one of my leaves so it fits on the bottom, and then we'll ink those up as well. Now, the video did run long. I think over 30 minutes is a long video, and I'm at 35 almost. So I did leave the coloring in for the dandelions for card number 1, but for the rest of them, for the rest of the video, I skipped the coloring and the die cutting just to save time. But these were so super easy to color in. I just using a couple shades of green, and I did leave the colors out on the top left for you guys. But just 2 shades of green for the leaves and the stems, and then I just blended those out. And like I said, super easy to color in. For the ladybugs, I'm going to use 2 shades of red, and then I'll accent them with a gray. And then the centers of the flowers, I used the yellow. And then I'm going to do a little shading over my dandelions using my C1 marker. This is going to give me a little bit of depth. Okay, once we have the coloring done, we're going to take the coordinating dies and we'll cut out each one of our images. We're going to make a ladybug card for our first card. Super fun and super cute. Once everything is die cut, we are going to set everything aside and work on our background panel. For my background panel, I have a piece of cardstock. I usually trim mine down to 5.5 inches by 4.25, so it's going to fit a standard size card base. I'm going to use some double stitched rectangle dies to cut out a panel, window frame here, and I'm also going to use some double stitched circle dies to cut out a circle with white cardstock and a slightly larger one with the pattern paper there. Once we have everything die cut, that's what I love about the double stitched circles and rectangle dies. I like that there's stitch lines in the positive and the negative, especially when I do frames. So I layered my white circle on my pattern paper. I'm going to actually glue that to the inside of my frame. Once we have that adhered, I was going to play around with my placement, and then I thought we better stamp our sentiment. So the sentiment I chose for this card says, "I wish you the best." I'm going to ink that up with my VersaFine Onyx Black ink. I think this ink is my favorite for sentiments because it stamps so beautifully, and it stamps really dark and crisp, almost flawless. Once we have that stamped, I did put foam tape behind my frame and my sentiment, and we just popped that on an A2 size card base. So it's the entire size of an A2 size card base. Now we can play with our scene building. I'm going to cut this down a little bit more and place the partially blown away dandelion on the inside of my panel. And then the rest, including the leaves, I popped up with foam tape. And the ladybugs also. Now in the stamp set, there are 3 different sizes of the dandelion seeds. And I think it makes it so fun and so whimsical, as if they're blowing in the air. So I'm taking the size, the largest, and I'm stamping that a few times. It's actually the same size as the one that the ladybug's holding. And then I'll take the smaller one and we'll stamp that a couple times as well. Okay, now for a little bit of sparkle, I'm going to use my, I'm going to use my Jelly Roll, my Stardust pen. And I have one of these already. So this is the one I have in my stash. I'm going to save the other one until this one runs out. But I love the concentrated glitter that this has. It's super duper sparkly. And I'm just adding accents here and there along my card, giving it lots of sparkle. And that finishes off card number 1. And I have some close-ups here on the end for you. Okay, now we're going to move along to project number 2. We're going to do a little bit more stamping. Now, I want to do the mushroom and the little mouse that's holding the dandelion. I'm inking all of my image up. When I color in with my Copic markers, I ink it up with Memento Tuxedo Black ink. Now, I did color in my images. I thought I'd go a little bit outside the box with the mushroom, and I thought it would be fun to have a purple mushroom. So I used 4 different shades of purple to color in my mushroom, and then I'm going to accent my mushrooms with my white gel pen. And you can see here, obviously they're colored in and die cut out. I'm going to add 3 little white dots to my little mouse's cheek. Super cute. And a purple mushroom. I thought, why not? Okay, I'm going to be using my Hero Arts Infinity dies. These are rounded corner infinity dies. And I'm going to create a panel. If you don't have a rounded corner die, you could use a round corner punch. I think it would work the same way. I'm just going to cut out my panel. Now I want to add a little bit of something on my background panel, so I'm going to use a stencil that I had just picked up. Now this stencil is a 2-pack, and it's called the Chevron Stencil Pair. It's from Hero Arts, and I like the polka dots in the chevron. I like all the patterns on here. I'm going to place that on my panel. I'm going to cover up the rest of it with a piece of Post-it tape. And then we're going to do a little ink blending with some Oxide inks. I'm going to use my Dusty Concord and go over my polka dots. And then to dull them down and also to give them a 2-tone look, I'm going to bring in some hickory smoke. And we'll add a little bit of smokiness to our Concord, or Dusty Concord. Okay, love that. Now I still think it needs a little something extra. So in my stash, I have some stitched lines. Now these don't cut out anything, they just add stitching to. And everything that I use today, guys, I'll leave links down below in the description area and over on my blog in case you're interested. But I add stitch lines to the left and right of my polka dots just to add a little extra texture. Now we're going to go ahead and stamp our sentiment. For this card, I chose the one that says, "No wish is too big or too small." I'm going to figure out my placement first, and then I did stamp my sentiment, again with VersaFine ink. Now I popped up my little images, and then I added a few of the little dandelion seeds floating in the air. And this ribbon is so pretty. I love a dusty or a smoky purple. I think it's just gorgeous. So I thought we'd put it to good use. I'm going to trim it down and then place that in between my card base here. And then use my tape runner. I'm going to go along my card base and then flip my ribbon over. Since it is on the thicker side, I think it's a 1-inch ribbon. But this is going to help with the placement. Using the grid lines, I'm going to even it out. And then to secure the ends, I'm going to take some gray and white baker's twine and I'm going to tie a bow on the very end. And again, this is just the top portion of my card base. And all 10 cards today are A2 in size, which are 4¼ by 5½ inches. Once my bow is tied, we'll trim off the tails, and also we'll trim down the ends of our ribbon here. Lovely. And then we'll go ahead and remove the release paper. I did add foam tape or fun foam behind my panel. I'm just going to remove the release tape paper and place that on my card base. Now for a little bit of sparkle, I'm going to go in with some iridescent gems from my stash. And you know, I didn't realize I wasn't using the sequins that were from the stash until my 10th card, which is horrible. So you don't have to use sequins from your stash. You can use the ones that are included in the kit because they are beautiful. There's not even any holes in them, and they're different sizes. So I would suggest using the ones that are in the kit, and it would create just as beautiful cards. But that finishes off that card. Okay, card number 3, I'm going to cut out a panel using a stitched rectangle die that is about ½ inch smaller than my card base. Once we have that cut out, you can see the stitch lines on the negative piece. We'll save that frame for another card. But we're going to work on the inside piece. Now I wanted to use the dandelion. I'm going to curve that bottom stem just a little bit. And I'm going to use I'm going to heat emboss it with gold embossing powder. So I'm going over my panel with my anti-static powder tool. And just so I can see where I'm stamping, I'm going to use my VersaFine Onyx Black ink. Now I have found that this doesn't harm the gold color at all if you use your VersaFine ink versus Versamark. At least with gold and silver, I have found that it doesn't affect the color. But I'm just going to take my dandelion and stamp it all over the background of this panel. We're going to take my gold embossing powder, and I'm going to scoop my panel filled with gold embossing powder, and then I went ahead and melted it, and we are good to go. Now for this card, I wanted to stay within the whimsical theme. Even though the dandelions are gold, kind of elegant, I wanted to kind of fancy it up a little bit, so I decided to add some dots to it. Starting with the purple, I just dotted around the outside edge of my dandelion, and then I went in with some pink dots, and I'm going to go in with my blue dots, and I believe I did the rainbow. I did one in here's the yellow, and then after I did the yellow, I decided to use a W2 is a warm gray to color in the centers of my dandelions and also the stems. I didn't want to take away from my little polka dots. And I did go in, but you can see them how different it looks. A little bit different, but fun. Now, my purple wasn't showing too much, so I decided to go in with a darker shade. And I believe this is V25. Now, after I got that one done, I want to show you all the colors I used, and I went around every single dandelion on the panel. So we have fun dots all over. Okay. Back panel is done. I'm not going to do much more to it, but I am going to stamp my sentiment on a piece of white cardstock. I just chose the sentiment that says believe, and I'm going to use my VersaFine ink, and I'm going to go over my sentiment here again with gold embossing powder. I went ahead and melted it and cut it out. I also cut out another piece of white cardstock. This is the most prettiest gold cardstock I've ever seen, actually. I think it's just got a beautiful texture pattern. There's no texture, but it has a pattern that looks like texture, but it's so pretty. And then on the inside it's a matte, so I created a card base with it. But I just placed both panels, starting with the white one on my card base. I just scored it in half and used my mold folder to reinforce the score line. I added my sentiment and then a few sequins from my stash when I could have used the ones that were in the kit. But I did decide to go over my sequin tops to cover up those holes with my Gold Coast. You could probably skip this step because the sequins in the kit don't have holes. But that finishes off that card. Okay, moving along to card number 4. We're going to use the dandelion again. This is Sparkle Spray from a previous kit. I don't remember what kit it came from, but it's super pretty. It has a gold hue to it. But I just added a little sparkle in the background of my panel here. just to add something there. Now I'm going to use some Distress Oxide inks for this card. I'm going to use, starting with Wild Honey, and then I'm going to go in with Spun Sugar. No, it wasn't Spun Sugar, it was Worn Lipstick, and then Dusty Concord. Starting with the Wild Honey, I'm going to ink up my dandelion. I'm going to stamp that overhanging a little bit on this panel. We're going to make a horizontal card today for this project. I stamped my Wild Honey, and then I cleaned off my stamp, and I'm inking up with my Worn Lipstick. We'll stamp that slightly lower. We'll repeat the process, this time adding the Dusty Concord, going a little bit higher. And then we're going to do that all along this panel here, so the entire panel is covered. I think these three colors are so pretty together. After we have that stamped, I did add fun foam behind it, and I stamped my sentiment. My sentiment for this card is, again, no wish is too big or small. I just stamped it right over the dandelions. Now I'm using, this is the Misty Rose shimmer paper, shimmer cardstock. I'm going to mat this panel directly on my shimmer cardstock here. And then we'll go ahead and tape that down to an A2 size white card base. Super easy card, but I think it's super fun. And when you stamp with the Oxide inks, the glitter the glitter spray kind of comes through. Now I'm going to go in with some gems. These are some ivory gems, and I'm going to add them to the center of my dandelions, and then a few over the top portion of them. The larger ones I put in the center, and then the smaller ones I put on the top. And then that completes that card. I don't think dandelions are limited to traditional colors. It is, I think it's, since it's a whimsical kit, we're going to make some whimsical dandelions. Okay, and that finishes off that card. Okay, now we're going to move along to our next card. This card I did color in and die cut out my little fairy. She is so sweet. I have this window die set. This is from a previous Hero Art. This is from a February of last year's kit. It was a beautiful window frame, and I just love it. And I cut out a window. We're going to make a shaker card for this. I'm taking a piece of acetate. The acetate that I like to use is from Hero Arts also. I'm just going to trim it down. I added score tape behind the window, so it stuck really well. And then also added some foam tape. Now it's a 4-pane window, and so I did add foam tape on each of the window panes, so I can add sequins into each section. This way my sequins won't all fall to the bottom. And I only added one layer of the foam tape. I used my spun sugar and added a little bit of color behind the background of my window frame here. Once we have that done, again, I'm going through my stash and I'm taking some sequins. These are iridescent sequins that I've had. These may have come from a previous kit. I didn't label them, darn it, but there's little iridescent stars in there too. But I added some to each window pane. We'll place the backing on our window. And then I think that looks so cute. Now when you only use one layer, the sequins don't move as much. They kind of stay more stationary, and I kind of like that sometimes. I'm going to add some foam tape behind my little fairy. We'll add her to our window pane, and then we're going to go ahead and stamp our sentiment with our VersaFine ink. Now our sentiment for this card says, "Sending happy fairy wishes your way." Super cute. I just stamped that towards the bottom, and then I decided to lower my fairy a little bit. She was a little too high up on the window. I wanted her legs kind of hanging down. And that completes that card. Super easy, nice little. If you don't have a window shaker window, I would suggest maybe some small rectangle dies, just creating your own window. Okay, now for my next card, we're going to do more ink blending. Starting off with Tumbled Glass. I am using Bristol Smooth cardstock. I don't have my glass mat, and I'm missing it, but I am going to be using a blending mat here. But I'll start off again with the Tumbled Glass. And then I'm going to add a little bit of spun sugar. These are some real soft colors. After we have our spun sugar, I'm going to take Twisted Citron and go over the very bottom. This card is super duper easy, but I love the soft background of it. And I love these colors, especially when you add gray to them. Once our ink blending is done, I'm going to take a stitched rectangle die and cut out a panel that's going to be slightly smaller than my card base. It will be, I would say, 1/2 inch smaller than my card base. I'm going to take my dandelion. This is the whole one, and I'm going to stamp my dandelion with Hickory Smoke Distress Oxide ink. I think the gray with these colors is so pretty. Once we have that stamped, I'll clean it off, and then we'll take the one that's partially blown away, and we'll stamp that right next to it, towards the bottom. Lovely. Okay, now I have a circle. This is my double stitch circle die. I'm going to cut out a partial circle to the right of my panel here. Once I die cut that out, I'm going to finish off the rest of my stamping with the little dandelion seeds. And I'm going to use all 3 of them and kind of trail up towards the top right. And I would really suggest the color combinations with the gray. I think you will be so happy with the color. It's just so pretty. Okay, I'm going to flip this panel over, and we're going to add some foam tape behind here. We're going to lift this up a little bit, and then this is going to go on my A2 size card base. I'm going to use the same ink to stamp my sentiment that says "I wish you the best" right in that circle area. And then using my Sakura Stardust pen, I'm going to add a few dots here and there, kind of trailing up the same way as the wind's blowing. And then I did add a few more sequins. The ones from my stash, because I still haven't found the ones that came in the kit. But that finishes off that card. Okay, card number 7. I'm going to be using this dome die that I've had in my stash. It's an MFT die, and I'll link it below in case you're interested. And I did stamp and color in my little mouse along with 2 of the mushrooms. I went with traditional colors for the mushroom. I'm using the real soft shimmer paper. I believe it's called Breeze. I used that to cut out my little dome shape. And I'm kind of arranging the way I want my images to go. And then we'll go ahead and stamp our sentiment. For this card, I chose the sentiment that says "Never Stop Dreaming." We're going to stamp that on the inside panel. This dome will cut out the frame and then the inside piece as well. Stamp that in there. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and tape down my inside piece to my card base. This is a landscape style card. I'm going to straighten it out a little bit, and then I'm going to take some foam tape and pop up my frame to give this card a little bit of dimension. I'm just going to take some 3M foam tape and trim it down. Place that all along the edge of my frame. And then we'll place that right over our background panel. And this is super shimmery, and I love the pale pink color of it. Okay, I'm going to tape down one of my mushrooms on the inside of my little dome, and then the other one's going to go on the outside. And then I will add some dimensional adhesive to the one on the outside, and then also to my little mouse. And I think when you use the pinks, and if you rosy up that little mouse's cheeks, I think it just blends beautifully together. Super cute. For bells and whistles for this card, I'm going to grab some more sequins. And I did stamp a few of the little dandelion seeds floating in the air. I thought about adding a couple more, and then sometimes less is more. Just 3 sequins I added. And then that finishes off that card. Here's some close-ups. Okay, now for my next card. We are going to make a dandelion card. These images were so easy to color in, but they look so realistic. I love these little dandelions. Okay, so I cut out, or I stamped 2 of the larger one and 1 of the little buds, and then along with 3 of the leaves. And I'm kind of arranging them on my panel. I did use the gold cardstock in the kit and cut out a smaller panel. Such pretty cardstock. And then I also die cut out a circle too. I'm going to add some foam tape behind the 2 of the larger, not sunflowers, dandelions. Did you know these are edible? I did not know that. No, but our horse loved them. Okay, now we're going to stamp the sentiment. Sentiment for this is the one that says "Your Dandy." I'm going to use some gold embossing powder over my VersaFine for this sentiment. Kind of tie in that gold specialty cardstock in the back. We'll go ahead and melt that. Lovely. Okay, now we'll tape down our bud here, kind of figuring out our placement, and then we'll add our whole dandelion flowers. We're going to glue this sleeve directly to our circle. We'll remove the release paper off of this dandelion and place that there. Add our next leaf, and before we add our 3rd leaf, we'll go ahead and attach this panel to our gold panel there. Making sure our sentiment's straight. Okay, then we can remove the release paper off of this leaf and add it to the bottom. Now we'll flip this panel over, and I did add fun foam behind here to add a little bit of dimension. We'll go ahead and remove the release paper off of the fun foam and place this panel on our A2 size card base. And I am going to open it up and trim off the excess. And I thought about adding some sequins to this one, but I like that gold cardstock. I thought that just looked so pretty, so I left it like that. That finishes off card number 8. Okay, for card number 9, one to use the super large dandelion. This could also be a sunflower, but I want to stamp the little fairy that's laying down, and also I'm going to use the dandelion bud. I'm going to stamp that twice. Okay. Once we have that stamped, I did color in and die cut out, and now we're going to go ahead and stamp our sentiment. Sentiment says "Never Stop Dreaming." I stamped that in the bottom of one of my panel here, and again I used the infinity rounded rectangle dies. I'm going to add some foam squares behind my super large dandelion. Place that right above the sentiment, kind of offsetting a little bit, and we'll pop up our little fairy who's sleeping. Place that image right on top of our little dandelion. And then we'll go ahead and just use a tape runner to adhere our dandelion buds, kind of offsetting them towards the top right here. At least that first one. We're going to lower it a little bit. And we'll add our leaf. Okay. Now I wanted to do a little bit of stenciling for my background for this little girl. So I have a piece of white cardstock, and I'm going to use my stencil again. And again, I'll take a piece of Post-it tape and mask off that diamond square shape. We don't want to get ink other than the larger polka dots for this panel. And I'm going to use my wild honey and go over my polka dots, and then to dull them down, I'm going to use some vintage photo. And I'm going to do 2 lines of these polka dots. We want a real thick line. So I kind of line it up, and then we'll do the same thing, starting with the wild honey, and then we'll blend it out with the vintage photo. We have some fun two-tone polka dots. Now I'm going to take my stitched rectangle die and cut out a panel. Once I have my panel cut out, I'm going to die cut it out one more time, but this time I scooted it over a little bit to shorten my rectangle so the width of it's not as wide, but I do have stitch lines on the edge. Okay, now I'm going to take a strip of black and white stripe paper. Using my tape runner, I'm going to tape that stripe paper to the side where my polka dots is, and I'm going about the same width that we trimmed off. This way it's going to still be 4 inches by 5 1/4 and leave me a little bit of a white border on my card base. Once that's taped down, I did add foam tape, or fun foam rather, behind this panel, and we'll go ahead and place our little sleeping fairy on our card base. Now I'm going to use my jelly roll pen for this card again, and I'm going to go around my little dandelions and my little fairy wings, and I did just draw circles around my little polka dots. You can't see them, but when you turn it a little bit, there's sparkles there, which is so nice. And that finishes off that card. Okay, now moving along to our final card. I did stamp and color in my little fairy and my mushroom. Super cute. I'm going to tape down my fairy to my mushroom, and then I did cut out a small frame using 2 of my stitched rectangle dies. This frame is going to fit my mushroom and my fairy on the very bottom, barely. And then I did cut out some of that real soft pink, I believe it's called Breeze, shimmer cardstock that came in the kit. Now, originally I was just going to take my fairy and put it on my soft pink panel, but it was a little too dull. So we're gonna fancy it up a little bit using an embossing folder, and this is an embossing folder from Sizzix. It's called Elegant Swirls. I'm going to emboss my shimmer cardstock, and it has some beautiful swirls on there. Love that shimmer. And then I'd also die cut out the same cardstock that I used using the largest rectangle die that I used for my frame. That way I have a background that's smooth and I can stamp my sentiment, which says, "May all your wishes come true." I just stamped that in the top. Now, I already removed the release paper off of my fairy, and so it stuck to my mat. So I carefully lifted it up, and I'm going to actually lower my fairy just a little bit because she was going over the top of my sentiment. So I kind of did a little readjusting, lowering my mushroom and my fairy there. We'll place her back on there. And then we'll flip this panel over and add a little tape behind it. And then that's going to go in the center of our card base. Very soft. It's a real pretty pink. Now for a little bit of shimmer. The only thing that I did, since the paper was so sparkly, the camera's not doing it justice, but it's just gorgeous. It's like a pale pink that you added shimmer spritz to. But I went over the fairy wings and the little fairy dress with my Sakura Jelly Roll pen. And that completes card number 10. So here's a look at all 10 cards that I made using the My Monthly Hero kit for December 2018. I think this kit was super fun, and I think kits are still available. If they are, I'll leave links down to the Hero Art shop below in case you guys are interested. But this is a fun kit. I think there's a lot of versatility in there and a lot of daintiness, if you like that. But thank you so much for joining me, guys. If you are a kit subscriber, I hope this gives you some ideas on how to use it. Again, I apologize for not doing my November kit, but I hope this makes up for it. I wish you a fantastic day. Thanks so much for stopping by. We will see you again real soon.